Televiziunea Română, întâlnirile JTI și Fundația Art Production vă recomandă Garantat 100%.
Salutare! Salutare la toată lumea! Bine v-am regăsit la Garantat 100%. Invitatul nostru din seara asta s-a născut în 1958 în West Covina, California. Este câștigător de premiu Oscar, cel mai înalt câștigător de premiu Oscar, actor de notorietate mondială, regizor de film, regizor de teatru, scenarist, producător, muzician, activist social. E prezent la Festivalul Internațional de Teatru de la Sibiu în calitate de regizor și director artistic al unei companii de teatru. Doamnelor și domnilor, suntem onorați să-i spunem bun venit la Garantat 100% domnului Tim Robbins. Hi there. That's it. Good evening. Thank you for accepting our invitation. It's a privilege to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
How was the moment when you played the little prince at the theater for the new city?
Oh, well, I was 13 years old.
Yep.
And my sisters worked at a theater in New York City.
Right.
Off Broadway, called the Theater for the New City. And it was it was like 1971, 72. And so it was very avant-garde, experimental, radical. The theater that they were doing was not like any theater that you'd see on Broadway. So my first experience with a theater was through a radical lens.
But it was a musical, wasn't it?
It was a musical of the Saint-Exupéry, the Little Prince. And I was the Little Prince. And I was also growing. So I started the play this height, and by the time the play was over, I was this height. Yes.
Okay.
And you could see, because my costume keeps going up and up and up and up. So by the end, I was the Little Prince like that. So it was a musical, and my first girlfriend in life was my ephemeral rose. And it's the essential is invisible to the eye, is what the wisdom of the fox that he tells the Little Prince. And so this was a very, you have to understand, this was a very interesting time. I was growing up as a Catholic in Greenwich Village. And everyone thinks of Greenwich Village as this place like San Francisco where all these progressives were and all this free thought was. But in fact, there was an old world influence in the village. Second generation and third generation Italians and Irish, and they were very tough. And so it was quite a violent place to grow up. And so you had a combination of hippies and beatniks and folk singers, and people that would beat up hippies and beatniks and folk singers. And so my friends in grade school were some of these people, and so I had to choose between one path or another, and the one path was the people that were intolerant, and the other path were the freaks and the weirdos and the most bizarre people you could imagine. And so my world was turned upside down by the theater. My world was, I was exposed to the most creative and most daring artists at the time as a young child. And through my first girlfriend, I met these people called the Angels of Light, which were this beautiful, it was more than a drag show. It was more than cross-dressing. These were radical artists that were affirming their sexuality at a time when it was very dangerous to affirm your sexuality. people that were very proudly gay and very proudly living in their own skin, and tough radicals that would beat people up if they were confronted with any kind of prejudice. And so it was a cauldron of creativity. It was a moment in time that it was quite unique, and you of course don't understand this when you're in the middle of it. You only understand that this is what the world is,
right?
But you don't understand how special it is until you look back on it several years later.
What was the method you were instructed in UCLA's Faculty of Theater, Film and Television? Did such thing existed, something called a method of teaching acting?
Well, yes, you had the Stanislavski method that I studied, and I think his teaching in his book is genius. But what happened in America was that it kind of got away from, I think it got away from Stanislavski into a more, I think, indulgent form of acting. And so, in fact, I think what happened was people were encouraged to have an indulgence in their own experience.
Okay.
And I never really liked that. I was more into the idea of the imagination. And because, simply put, when you play Medea, you know the character Medea, how many people have had the experience where they've killed their children? Nobody, right? So it's very difficult to use your own experience to play Medea. But if you start with your idea that you can create anything because of your imagination, this is, for me, a method that is more conducive to creating an alternative reality. I don't like substitution as an actor. I don't want to imagine when someone died in my life to make me cry. I want to imagine what the character is doing, what his extraordinary circumstance is, because it's more extraordinary than my life. Every theater piece, every play should be more extraordinary than our normal lives. And so when we play characters, we should be able to imagine the extraordinary and not the mundane. And so my method is to and the method we use at the Actors Gang is to imagine the extremes of emotion, to train ourselves to be in the extremes of emotion that have nothing to do with our lives.
In this respect, there's always been a mantra concerning the difference in between American films and European films. Is there such thing in theater? Do you talk such a thing with your colleagues from the Actors Gang?
Yes, I believe so. And one of the things that we've done from the very beginning, we've been 34 years now at the Actors Gang. We started with a play called Ubuwa, the Alfred Jarry. And the next play we did was Midsummer Night's Dream. And then we did a German expressionist play. So we've always come to the theater through Europe, not through America. I love the playwrights in America, the Tennessee Williams and the Arthur Miller, and Eugene O'Neill. They're great playwrights, and they served an incredibly important function in shattering a kind of theater that was superficial at the time, in the early 20th century. Ibsen did this first. Theater was romantic and floral, and it was not about reality. And Ibsen shattered it. He said, no, there's things happening in this world that are important. There's things happening with your own body and your own sexuality and your own oppression from a society that we must address in the theater. And so that was really important at the time. Unfortunately, I think what happened in the course of the years was it became more and more indulgent about me and not about the world. And so American realism, I think, got more and more into the idea of the domestic as drama instead of the world as drama. And so at the Actors Gang, we've always approached theater as something that is about the world and not about a living room. And we're very proud that we've only done one play at the Actors Gang that has a couch. You understand?
Yeah, obviously.
We had no sets of a couch. We had no living rooms in any of our plays. So when we address a piece of theater, we want to think about what is this saying about the world and the society we live in, and how is this about the most important things in life, not necessarily about me and my life, but about everybody's life.
After you announced on Facebook that you were about to come to Europe, one of your friends texted you the following: "Go crush Europe."
Go crush Europe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Crush, you know what, you understand crush, yes?
Obviously.
It means a good thing. It
Yes.
doesn't mean destroy. It means do
Obviously.
well. It's merde. Yeah.
Okay, your pop was an actor and a musician?
Yes, my father was an actor.
Was it easier for you to, I don't know how to put it, to penetrate the big film business?
No, it didn't make it, no. My father had nothing to do with, other than, well, he had a lot to do with raising his family in a creative environment, and with the idea from a very early age that we saw our father make his living at something that he loved doing. So in that way, yes, in every way it had to do with my success. But as far as getting into the door, no. Because I was very blessed, very fortunate to win a contest in college that got me an agent, and then it was a year later before I got my first job. And that was a semi-miracle that happened, because I was a punk rocker at the time, and I just didn't care about show business. I would go to these auditions and I would be like, I'm not gonna do this. Like, I had an attitude, And so I was first cast as a criminal, That was the first role I got, was because I had a terrible attitude. I was just like, they were like, that's good, we'll put him in that, He's the asshole guy. Yeah, play him. Yeah, I'll play an asshole really well. So, yeah, so they were very supportive of my parents, but they did not my dad didn't have a particular amount of success as an actor.
Because everybody talks about the clan, about, I don't know, the group, the tribe, people having good social positions as important acters and their relatives penetrating Hollywood.
Yeah, I think it's getting more and more like that now, because it's becoming, there's a less and less of a meritocracy in Hollywood. So my kid, my daughter, she started working as an actress, and then when I was young, you work as an actor, the next job you get more money, and the next job you get more money. But now in Hollywood, it's just everything at the low rate. So I think only people that are wealthy are going to be able to sustain being actors, and that's not a good thing. That's not good for the art of acting.
We'll get to that, I promise.
Yeah, but I think you're right. There is a certain perception that it's a club.
It is.
But when I was coming up, it didn't matter if you were someone's kid. What mattered if you were good or not. And maybe if you're someone's kid, you can get in the door, but you still have to have the talent to make it work. As I'm finding with my child, Jack, who I've been producing for him, he's a filmmaker, and he's super talented. And in fact, I think it works against him, because I think people think that the only reason he's getting it is because of me. But he's quite talented, and he's been working on his own and getting jobs on his own without people knowing that he's my son. So it's a double-edged sword, as we say. Yeah.
Okay, how do you get rid of Andy Dufresne, Dave Boyle, Griffin Mill, Nuke LaLoosh, just a few of your big characters played in film along the years? Do you have to get rid of them? I mean, when you work, not when you think about your career, because these are contained no matter what.
Yeah, they start to live with you a little bit. you know, particularly when you're playing in a drama, if there's something heavy, you start to dream like them, you start to act like them. But this is why it's good to not do the method, because the method is, I've seen people get lost in their roles where there's a sadness or a depression that overcomes the person. And with the way that we work at the Actors Gang, it's like you have to be able to switch from one emotion to another immediately. And I always encourage actors, you know, there's a fallacy that, hey, if I cry on stage, then I'm doing a great job. And I don't believe that. I believe if they cry when you're on stage, then you're doing a great job. And oftentimes, actors get lost in their own emotion and start crying, and they can't get out of it. And then the next scene, they have to be in a totally different emotion, and they're still in that emotion. So it's a dangerous thing. So I don't subscribe to the idea that you have to get lost in a character, but at times, like when I was doing Mr. River, that was a very hard character to live with. But thankfully, it was fast. We did things fast.
So it's not just a job.
It's an adventure.
Okay. Okay.
Which is, by the way, that's actually was an ad for the military. So it used to, like when I was, you know, it's not just a job, it's an adventure. Yeah, you get killed. What an adventure. Okay, well, here we go.
Few people will think of the fact that you had small parts in Moonlighting, in Top Gun, and fabulously in Tenacious D in The Pick of Destiny.
Thank you.
Very different experiences, really very different experiences.
Well, the first two you mentioned, I did because I was young and I needed to make rent. So, you know, there's a while in your career where, you know, you get a job, you're like, yes, rent, and I can do theater now, you know? So, and then you start becoming more successful, and then I think you have to start saying no. And that's one of the big talents you have to figure out, is how to say no. But with Tenacious D, this is a friend of mine for a long time,
Jack Black. Is your discovery as an actor?
Yeah, I worked with him. Well, I don't know. He discovered.
He was in the Actors Gang.
Yes, he did a show with me when he was 12 years old. So, and then he would start hanging around the Actors Gang, and we were like, you know, who's this kid? And you know, we were like, we would want to be hanging out, drinking, and you know, and we were like, can't do it to the kid. Get the kid out of here. And finally, he got to be 18, and then he started coming, and we put him in a show, and then I took him on tour with me, and I cast him in his first role. But Jack's talent was there from the start. He was always, I didn't make him, you know, he made himself. He's a great talent. Yeah.
In Hollywood.
But the Tenacious D and Austin Powers and all those, those were things that I wanted to do because either friends asked me to do a small part or because I thought, well, that would be a lot of fun. But not to, you know, it wasn't like, I didn't need to be the star of the film. I just liked the filmmaker. And so if I liked the filmmaker, I did it for Spike Lee and Jungle Fever, and I did a few other films like that where I played small parts because I wanted to support the filmmaker.
In Hollywood, when somebody comes with a script, there are lots of guys, they do what they call development of the story, development of the script. What do they do, as a matter of fact?
The development process?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a nightmare. It's where you have a good idea. I don't involve myself in that. If a script is solid, it's a good script, then I will think about doing it. But this idea that we'll fix it is, I just don't believe. It's like, oh yeah, it's a script, but we'll fix it. It's always a bad thing. It's always a bad thing because what happens is 18 people start writing the script, and the problem is, I'd rather fail with one person's vision than be in the long, protracted experience of 18 people writing a script and you don't know what the vision is. It's just a big mess. And so, I don't like that.
Frank Darabont was talking at a certain moment, the director of The Shawshank Redemption, was talking at a certain moment precisely at the 20th anniversary of the film. He was talking about decent interventions of producers on the script. You were there together with Morgan Freeman and Frank Darabont. Which is the limit of a decent intervention?
Well, it's as Robert Altman used to say, if it's a good idea, we'll do it, you know. And that could come from the person that's doing the craft service, you know, the person that's making the snacks. If he would invite everyone into the screening room to watch the dailies. So he didn't have a hierarchy. Mm-hmm. And that's a nice thing, when everyone's opinion is worth something. So that, I would say that's a decent intervention if someone has an idea, as long as you have someone that is the captain of the ship that's saying yes or no. It's when the captain of the ship is being told by the people that own the ship, you have to sail this way, or you have to sail that. That's when you're going to run into weather that's going to sink the ship. You have to trust the captain. You have to trust the person that you've hired to be the director that will guide the project. And it's where people don't have confidence, or they are more likely, they just want to be creative. That's really where it runs into trouble. When people that have power and money want to be creative, they should just do their own film. They should just make their own film. They should hire a director they trust and let that director sail the ship.
If we are around this topic, I know that you had a pact with Robert Altman.
Yes.
Please tell us the whole story of that pact. I find it more than interesting, really.
So, first of all, to preface this, the movie that made me believe that I wanted to do movies was Nashville by Robert Altman. I saw that film when I was in high school, and it blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I want to do that. Now, I was a theater person, and I still am a theater person, but that kind of movie, I wanted to do that kind of movie. The rest I didn't really care that much about, but that kind of movie that's what I want to do, if I do movies. And so when I got to meet him, I met my idol, the person that I respected the most in the film industry. And at that time, he was persona non grata. He was someone that Hollywood had given up on, and he was doing theater, actually, at the time. And so I met him on this project, and my agent said, you're going to go meet Robert Altman. And I said, oh my God. And I said, what's the sides? What do I audition for? He says, there's no sides. He just wants to meet you. So I go to his house, and I have lunch with him. And I'm wondering, when is the audition? And he's just talking, we're talking, and he's got his staff and some of his family around. And we're laughing and having a good time. And he said to me, the reason I wanted to meet you was because you do theater. It was because I've read about your theater, and I think what you're doing is really important. And I was like, what? My idol is saying that what I'm doing is important? That's amazing. My head is like, what? And so then at the end of this lunch, he goes to me, he says, hey, you want to smoke a joint? And I'm like, yeah, right? And so now I'm getting high with my hero, right? And I'm like, what is happening in my life? And so I get home, and the agent says, well, he wants you to do the movie. And so that movie didn't happen. That was Shortcuts. And then a couple months later, the player came up, and he offered me the player. And at that time, I was broke, and I had nothing. And I just had my first son. Yep. And I didn't have any money. And I was offered this job for a ton of money. And it was going to conflict with the player, and I just had to take the chance that the player was going to happen, because it wasn't financed yet. So I took the chance, and it winds up happening. And then I get to LA, and I get into this meeting with my idol, and he says to me, listen, sit down. He goes, listen, at some point, there's going to be a producer on this show, or someone from the money, and they're going to try to get in between us and the creative process. I guarantee it's going to happen. So here's the deal. Will you make a pact with me now? Will you make a deal with me now? That if that happens, you walk off the picture. And if it happens with me, I walk off the picture. If any producer comes up to you and tries to get in between the creative process, you quit. And if anyone comes to me, I quit, right? I said, okay, it's a deal. And it did happen. And we stayed solid. We were like, we're united, right? So I didn't find out till much later. He would have had that film financed 5 months beforehand with another actor. But he said to them, I made a promise to this guy, Tim Robbins, and I am not breaking it. And he waited and waited and waited until the money came through. And I didn't understand that till much later. But it's the kind of person he was. He was a rebel, a total radical, and he was dedicated to the idea that the creative process should be protected, should be something that is a sanctity of artistry, that you must protect yourself against intervention like that, because if you don't, it will all fall apart. And so the deal with me was, we will both quit. Wow. Yeah. So it taught me a lot. That film taught me a lot, because it taught me that if you persevere and you stay strong, you will get your film made. I also saw this on another film I did called Bull Durham, where I saw the director. We're 2 days into filming, and we're watching the dailies. We're in a hotel in North Carolina. And all of a sudden, I hear a commotion behind me, and Ron Shelton, who is the director, has got one of the producers up against the wall like this, and he's going, "You ever talk to my actor again, I'll fucking kill you!" Right? I'm like, all right? And Kevin Costner goes, "Uh-oh, Cujo." He's like, "Oh no, what's happening?" And it turned out that the producer was like trying to make his way into the good graces of one of the actors by saying something negative. And Ron, at that point, he said, I'm going to take it. He was first film. He said, if I don't do this now, he told me later, I will not be able to do my film. But if I do this, I could get fired. But if I do this, I will also if they don't fire me, I will make my film. And it's that kind of dedication to one's own vision that I took with me when I started to direct films.
Yeah. Yep. How do you manage to live in between these two worlds? I mean, on one hand, this type of world with the big business in the movie industry, and on the other hand, I mean, the world of theater and the world of the so-called less important movies.
Well, I don't think they're less important. I think
so-called.
Well, no, but here's the thing. History will prove that they are as important as the movies that make money.
I do hope so.
And so the movies that I've done, even though they haven't, in the past 10 years, even though they haven't gotten a lot of money behind them, I believe are great films. So it will take time, and people will catch up. Yeah. But I stand behind all of those films. I think they're really great films. I think what's happened in the last 10 years is that the industry has gotten more and more corporate, so that it's more and more difficult for someone like Robert Altman to come along and make a film that he wants to make. Now they just fire him. Now they don't even hire him. Now they just ignore those kinds of people. They don't want the trouble. They want something that they have already pre-tested and pre-marketed to make a certain amount of money. And it's like a formula, just like selling soda pop is a formula. They know the strategy, they know where to release it, and they know how much money it will make. And that's basically business that does not want to take a risk. And the great thing about the movies in the 70s and 80s was there were gamblers. There were people, mavericks, that said, you know what? Let's give this crazy hippie some money, and let's have him make a film, and let's see what happens, right? And they let him alone, and lo and behold, you had this flourishing of great visionary filmmaking in the 70s. That was all a mistake. That was Hollywood like throwing up its arms like, we're doing Thoroughly Modern Millie, this great musical, and no one wants to come see it. We don't understand our audience anymore. Let's let the hippies have it for a while. And that produced, Scorsese, that produced all these great Peckinpah and Altman and Pakula and all these amazing filmmakers that came out of that period. that was total artistic freedom that these directors had. You don't have that now. That's not happening.
Some people talk about a certain apocalyptic vision upon Hollywood, but is there still enough room for people of this kind?
I hope so. I believe that, here's the problem, is the formula is, for those kinds of people, hey, you know what, we'll give you $3 million and you make a film. Maybe that's a lot, maybe just $1 million, right? You go ahead and make whatever film you want to make. Go ahead, $1 million, go ahead. And what happens is, unless it wins a film festival, they're not going to put money into releasing it.
Okay.
So you have your $1 million film, but by the time that it goes to the film festival, the investors already make their money back because they've done the sales. So they don't have to release it. And by the way, it's going to cost them $10 to $15 million to release it. So if they've already made their money back, why would they take the chance of making it available to the wide public? So I think, unfortunately, they have to spend money on a film if you're going to be able to see it. So all these low-budget films that are being made, there might be some genius films in there, and like I said, history will tell us, and we'll catch up to the genius of those films. So yes, those films are being made, but there's not enough people in the industry that are interested in putting it out to the wide release.
By the way, if we talk about history, which is the real and the effective meaning of having arts education in the school?
Arts education?
Yeah.
I think it's the difference between a civilized society and a non-civilized society. I think that it's so essential. We've had some terrible non-visionary leadership in our country. Just to give you an example, the state of California eliminated arts education funding in their public schools about 10 years ago. And guess what happened? The crime rate went up and the prison population went up. There's a direct correlation between no arts education and rising crime rate. There's scientists that will tell you that study the brain. There's a certain element, a certain part of the brain, this creative side it's that side that goes, I don't want to do it that way. I think I'm going to try to do it this way. Now, in art, that's fantastic because it creates new visions. But in life, if you don't have art as an outlet, it's the thing that gets you into trouble. So the idea that this part of the child's makeup, their part of their development is being denied is a recipe for disaster. And so we work in the prisons with the Actors Gang. We have a prison project we've been doing for 10 years. And I can tell you, I can testify that 9 out of 10 people that we work with in prison had no arts education in grade school, middle school, or high school. So I know that's a direct correlation.
There are lots of people saying and thinking something like this. All this crap with alternative education, art education, and any type of political correctness is just a liberal mumbo-jumbo. The real solution is order by all means, isolation, and separation. Only the old school methods work.
Yeah.
What would you say about this?
I'd say the old school methods has gotten us into a lot of trouble in the past, and if they want to do that, they are doing that, and it's getting us into more trouble now. That's that kind of, tough love thing that it's a disaster. It's what do I say to that?
Okay.
There's no compassion in that. There's no love in that. There's no possibility for transcendence or invention. All of the great development and advancements in human culture have come from creative minds.
Right.
They don't come from the locked-in mind. The internet didn't come from a bunch of people that were strict, and the internet happened because people said, you know what, I want to try something brand new. It's those kinds of brains that we need in the world. This other paradigm has failed, and it's going to continue to fail. It just doesn't work. It's the old, you know, it's the old. How do you live in freedom? This is one of the concepts of this new play that we're doing at the Actors Gang called Harlequino, On to Freedom. Mm-hmm. What is freedom? What does it mean? What is it to be free? And ultimately, it has to be about more than just that I am not a slave. It's got to be so much more than that. And that actual living in freedom should be something that makes people nervous. It should be something that makes the autocrat that you were just describing should be nervous. Because the free mind will look at the autocrat and say, no, I'm not going to do it your way. I'm going to be a trouble for you. The people that are no trouble, they're the people that don't care about art. The people that get in line, the sheep, they're not the creative minds. And that's, in a lot of ways, if you're going to manage a society, autocratic, fascistic, whatever, you need people to comply. You need people to get in line. And getting in line, you don't want arts education. Because arts education is going to tell you, you don't have to be in line. No, you can create your own line. You can make it a circle. You can make it a triangle. You can make whatever you want out of this, this crazy thing called life.
You openly supported Bernie Sanders in the campaign in a very dedicated way. What will you do now? Will you support the Democrat candidate?
I say support.
Okay.
Not supported.
Okay.
I still support him.
Okay.
She is not the nominee yet.
Yeah.
And I will continue to support Bernie Sanders until he is not the nominee.
When he is not the nominee, will you support the Democrat candidate?
That is a hypothetical question, and so I will not answer that.
Okay. Yeah. The whole world is watching the American campaign.
Yes.
Can we talk about this?
Sure.
All right. Some people are somehow afraid of what's going to follow. Some others will say that it's the biggest reality show done up to now, but it will end with a Democrat win, no doubt about that. What do you think?
I can't see the future. I am not a bit, I can't see it. Let me put it this way. I hope that we have a progressive president.
Okay. 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 Now, with your kind permission, I will switch to a very serious topic. Very serious. I mean, we cannot avoid this. I mean, the Orlando nightclub shooting. What is this saying about the moment the American culture, the American way of life is in right now?
Well, let's just say, first of all, in America, we had 30,000 people killed by guns this last year, I think it was. That's 30,000 people. That's an epidemic. That's a very sad reflection on our culture. We have too many guns, and we have too many people stoking the fires of racism and homophobia. There's certain people that stoke a fire of nationalism. Just in this case alone, we have one of our presidential candidates saying that we should cut off immigration of all Muslims into the country. Now, this guy that was in Orlando was born in New York. He's an American. So it has nothing to do with that reality. So we have people that are always trying to stoke the fires of distrust and hatred. And we have a media that complies with that and does not reject it. They report it. They say, oh, yes, he said this, and here's what she said. And so it doesn't help. You don't have a critical thinking in our news media. We don't have someone in the news media, by the way, that will say the word lie. We don't have someone that says you're lying. For some reason, that word is verboten. That word is forbidden. Yep. Someone will be on a stage in a debate and they will lie, and the moderator will let this happen. So I think that the only way that we're going to shift and move away from this kind of negativity is if everyone turns off their television. I think that will lead to a more peaceful world. I think that and it's a very ambitious thought, and think of how scary that is, where you have to read a book, or you have to talk to your neighbor, or you have to go to a bar to find your political opinion and how it reflects on society. That you have a discussion with someone to say, what do you think about this? And to have respect for the person instead of demonizing them into the other or to the evil. This is something that Orwell writes about in 1984. Right. He writes about the 2-minute hate, where everyone in the party looks at the telescreen and says and yells at the telescreen because they hate the rebel leader Goldstein. And they yell with hatred for 2 minutes, right? Every day. It's a prescription, right? Mm-hmm. So we, in our country, we engage in a 24-hour hate with our media. We look at our media and we get angry and angry and angry and angry at the other side. The Republicans are all this way, or the Democrats are all this way. And we will have division as long as that happens. And as long as that happens, there will be no common ground between left and right. And I'm sorry, that's the design. That's intended. That is the intention of the media, is to keep division. Because if you don't have division between the left and the right, you might find that they might meet somewhere in the middle. And that if they meet somewhere in the middle, they might realize who the real enemy is. And the real enemy is the ones that are keeping them from health care and from better jobs and from better schools for their kids and from a clean river that flows through your town. Those are the people that are getting in the way of progress and getting in the way of health in our country. And as long as we're fighting with each other, we'll never understand that those are the people that are screwing with our lives. And this is by design. I'm not paranoid. This is not some kind of conspiracy thing. This is the way it works. And so the intention is, if you were to all just turn the television off, see how long it will be before you might seek out human interaction. See how long it might be before you find yourself with your enemy finding some common ground.
Hopefully they will not switch off the TV set when this show will be aired. I hope. Hopefully. Okay.
Well, this is a cultural program. We can just have cultural programs.
One final question.
Yes.
Let's pretend I am a student in my 20s. I am deeply fond with theater. I love theater. What should I think about? My career or the way I'm doing my job?
The way you're doing what job?
The adventure.
The adventure of the job.
Yep.
Okay, so what I usually say is that the way you should choose theater as a profession, or show business, or whatever, is if you will be absolutely miserable if you don't do it. So if by not doing it, you will be lesser of a person, if by not doing it, you will be sad, then you should do it. If you're doing it because you want to be famous, or if you're doing it because you want to be rich, don't do it. Because that comes to maybe 5% of people are able to make a living, maybe 1% sometimes. the great thing about theater is that it's the last art form, and the reason why I am doing it so much recently, it's the last art form where you can actually tell people they cannot communicate with their cell phone.
Yeah.
It's a demand made to an audience. Be with me. Be with us for 2 hours in the dark. Be with your imaginations for 2 hours in the dark. And let us take you somewhere. You don't do this in the cinema anymore. You don't do it at music concerts. Occasionally you do it in a hall like this when a discussion is happening. But as the art form, it's the last one where you actually can have a communication, a real communication with an audience. And that's incredible. That's something that is truly special because you can really shift consciousness that way. You can't do it if you're constantly distracted. Oh, yeah. And so I would say you're not going to make money in theater. What you're doing is the passion of the communication. If what you want to do with your life is to be able to tell stories to people in a darkened room and take them on a journey, and that brings you joy, then you should do it. If you're doing it because you want to be the center of attention and because you want to be the star, it's not good for theater, and it's not good for you. It's ultimately going to destroy you, that kind of thing.
I will insist for 10 more seconds. What if the students tell you, you're fully right, I will do that, but I keep on thinking that my joy will not pay my rent, will not feed my stomach. What will you answer to that?
Find a way to pay your rent and feed your stomach.
Tim Robbins, it's been a privilege to meet you. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Tuturor celor care sunt alături de Garantat 100%, mulțumim frumos pentru încredere. Ne vedem data viitoare. Noapte bună.